Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Startup Junkies Podcast. This is Caleb Talley, and I'm with my co-hosts, Jeff Amerine and Davis McIntyre. Hello, guys.
How's it going?
Great to be back. Beautiful Friday afternoon.
Absolutely.
It is. And we are thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Mark Goulston. He is a Marshall Goldsmith MG 100 coach, founding member of Newsweek's Expert Forum. He's a former FBI and police hostage negotiation trainer. He is an acclaimed author, written a number of books, articles, blogs, renowned psychiatrist, and we are so glad to have him with us today. Hello. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, guys.
So give us the origin story. We want to, roll it back. How did you get into, such a varied career? Start at the beginning and give us the highlights.
Well, I trained as a psychiatrist, and early on I was a specialist in suicide prevention because one of my early mentors started really that whole specialty. He started the suicide prevention centers in Washington, Los Angeles, and the American Association of Suicidology. And I'm trained as a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, but Dr. Ed Schneidman was a psychologist. And I started my practice by his referring me these suicidal patients, and I found a way to get through to them. And I was very fortunate because I went from training out into practice. And I had this realization that when I was with people who were feeling suicidal and I looked into their eyes, their eyes were screaming out at me, "You're checking boxes and I'm running out of time." So I had the choice where I could check boxes and cover my rear, but not help them, or throw away the boxes. And what happened is I learned to throw away the boxes, and wherever their eyes were, I just let them take me there. And what they did is they took me into the dark night of the soul. And when I got there and they felt less alone in hell, they started to cry with relief because that's all they felt. And so that somehow enabled me to look out at the world through other people's eyes. In fact, something else that you didn't mention, I was an advisor in the O.J. Simpson trial with the prosecution. And we don't mention a lot because they lost. But I was able to look at the courtroom through the jury's eyes. And so what they said to me is, just keep faxing us your observations and we won't tell you when we're using them, but your stuff is so off the wall, but some of it really works. So for instance, some of you are on the young side, but I think Jeff will remember one of the things that they use that I mentioned to them is when I looked out at the courtroom through the jury's eyes and it was time for the closing argument, I faxed them. I said, it's the end of the trial. Everybody's exhausted by hearing everybody's voices. Nobody's heard O.J. Simpson's because this is a criminal trial. He spoke in the civil trial. And I faxed them and I said, how do you haunt a jury? How do you hold their attention when they go into deliberation? And I thought, you got to haunt them. And so I shared with Marsha Clark, I said, make sure in your closing argument, you play the 911 tapes of Nicole Brown Simpson naming O.J. Simpson as the person who basically murdered her. And so they included that in the closing arguments. So I developed this ability to sort of look at the world through other people's eyes. And 3 years ago, which is pertinent to this show, I did a one-man show where I played Steve Jobs coming back from the dead, and I played him from 1997 to when he came back to Apple to 2007 when they released the iPhone. So this is how the world looks through Steve Jobs' eyes, if I can share that with you. Are you interested?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's also the way Elon Musk looks at the world. So I gave a presentation at Cambridge University to their technology innovation thing called How to Think Like Elon Musk. So if you're listening in, the difference between a visionary thinker and non-visionary thinkers is a visionary thinker looks at the unknown as an adventure to be lived. So they step into the unknown as an adventure. Steve Jobs did that. Elon Musk did that. But a lot of other people look at the unknown as a danger to be avoided. And the reason Steve Jobs and Elon Musk see it as an adventure to be lived is that they've had a lifelong experience of just stepping into the unknown, and dots spontaneously come together and they coalesce into products. And one of the reasons that Steve Jobs and Elon Musk like drugs and psychedelics is because if you haven't noticed, both of them are kind of control freaks. So when you're a control freak, you have a lot of convergent thinking, which is good for focusing on a product and connecting dots. But when you want to be an adventurer, you need to be divergent in your thinking. So one of the things that drugs, psychedelics do is if you're not afraid of letting go of control when you're under the thrall of those drugs, you see things and they don't scare you. So does this make any sense to any of you so far?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, we're tracking with you. Understood.
And then here's something else, because something that my partner and I are rolling out is when I played Steve Jobs coming back from the dead, there is a video that you might be able to put into this, but I'll just tell you where it is. If you look up Xerox Park, Steve Jobs, National Geographic, there is a video of Steve Jobs and Wozniak, a dramatization of their discovering the graphical user interface at Xerox Park. And I'll sort of imitate it because I've done this through many of the performances I gave. And it starts out like this, where Steve Jobs is kind of like this, the smartest guy in the room. And then they show a Xerox technician using the graphical user interface in the mouse. And so he goes like this, and then he leans in and his eyes open, and he goes, wow. And what wow means, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Or if you're doing marketing for your company, wow is people who look at your website or listen to you, or this includes investors, they think, I can't believe what I'm seeing, hearing, or reading. So the wow grabs people's attention, even if they have ADD. And then what happens is he says to the Xerox technician, can I try it? And then the music goes up and you see his hand move onto the mouse, and he stares at the screen and he starts to sweat. So the wow goes to and the is, I can't believe what this does. This is amazing. And in that 2-minute video, he looks back at Wozniak, and Wozniak is in the video. He does a voiceover, and he says, when Steve looked at me like that, I said, once they go there, they're not going back. So Jobs was kind of the marketer, but Wozniak was the thinker. He was the technologist. And so that's the You look back at Wozniak, and that's what Wozniak said. Once they go there, they're not going back. And then he looks back on the computer, and Walter Isaacson comes into the video and says, they didn't know what to do with this experiment at Xerox, but Steve Jobs knew they needed to do something, and then it ends with yes. So put that, if you're watching this, write down wow, yes. And that's what you have to create in your customers and clients. That's what you have to create in your investors. That's what you have to create in talent, the top talent that you're trying to attract to your company. So wow is, this is unbelievable, astonishing, amazing. Is, this is too good to ignore. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but this is something I've got to use. And then yes is, I see how we can use that, sold. So go to your marketing departments, if you're a startup, and say, whenever any of our customers, clients, investors, or people we're trying to attract as talent, whenever they see anything associated with our company, does it trigger, wow, yes. because if it doesn't, everything else is never mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's some great insight. And it's, so much of it is we're inundated with information and with data and with inputs. And it's easy to just get overwhelmed because we're swimming kind of in a sea of inputs coming at us from all different angles. But it's very few things that you have that kind of a visceral reaction to that really makes you think everything's going to be different based on this.
Yeah, and we help companies with it, but you don't need us. We facilitate it because it's in our DNA, my partners and my. But what you do is go back to your company and sit people down. And if you're a startup, it's a small company, but have people share wow, yes experiences. Maybe it's when you met the person who became your wife or your husband, or maybe it's when you discovered you needed to get divorced, or maybe it's when you bought your first Tesla, or whatever it was. But as you get people sharing that wow, yes experience, immerse your entire team in it and say, we have to make everything connected to our company, our products, and our services. We have to trigger this in other people. And I'm an advisor to one of the largest accelerators in Southern California. And one of the things I've been doing is doing presentations on how to pitch investors. So can I give you a few tips from those presentations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure that we have a fairly sizable crowd of investors that watch this podcast as well. So I'm really eager to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so here's something else that I think is, hopefully this is a takeaway. Whenever you're with people, and this can be, I did this with 1,000 business people, managers, and CEOs in Moscow, or it can be with one person. What you have to realize is that people aren't just listening to you, they're listening for something. It's a different dynamic. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example, and I'm going to transform the three of you and tell me how this feels different. If I focus on what you're listening to, and I'm delivering bullet points, you'll note them and you'll say, he seems pretty good. He's an okay guest. This seems, relevant. But if I pause and I think about what you're listening for, tell me if this lands correctly. As I create an avatar of the three of you, I think what you're listening and looking for from your guests is something that gives immediate, applicable, and doable by them value to your listeners and viewers, because your listeners and viewers trust you, have confidence in you, and you want to honor their trust and confidence. You don't want to disappoint them. And I'm guessing you're also listening for that guest who might have a best-selling book, but they're just a stiff. They are just boring as all get up. And then you have to go back to them and say, we like your book, but we couldn't post your episode. You want to do it over again? So you're listening also for people that you need to protect your viewers and listeners from, because you want to honor the fact that they're looking to you for value. So is any of that accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. That's exactly accurate. We have, after 250 episodes, we've had a ton of people on from all over the country and all over the world. And there's a certain dynamic. There's a rapport that's established with good guests. There's this liveliness of conversation. There's this interesting level of input that's beyond the same sort of superficial BS we hear from most people. And when you get to that nugget, it's a real moment. And you'll notice, and if someone were to analyze all of the podcasts we've had, where we really get into some interesting ground is where someone goes a level deeper. It's something substantive and interesting, and not the same old sort of Dilbertian jargonesque dribble that you get from most people that have written something about some topic. So you're spot on. We do kind of queue up for that. And then the postmortem on the podcast, we talk about it a lot. It's like, interesting guy, but this guy was like a cliche generator. So that type of thing. And I'm not bad mouthing any of our guests by any means. There is a difference. There is a difference.
Well, I hope I'm passing the sniff test so far.
Oh yeah, very, very deep stuff. Very interesting. And one of the things that we overlook is the game of entrepreneurship is all about the talent. It's not the product or the technology or anything else. It's all about the talent and the culture of the team and those personal interactions. And we get lost in the mechanics of the process of lean canvas, lean startup, customer discovery. And we forget that it's a people game. It's really a people game. And understanding that, having the ability to be empathetic, as you were describing, or to put yourself in the other person's shoes, whether it's a customer, an associate, or a shareholder, that's not something that everybody gets that's in this business. So I think the kind of stuff you're talking about is extremely valuable. It's definitely resonates with me based on my own experience.
It's interesting. You're reminding me when I did one of my Steve Jobs Returned episodes, one of the most fun parts of it is I do a Q&A as Steve Jobs. And so I'm a little bit, I may be coming off pretty strong, but I'm a severe introvert, but I'm a role-specific extrovert, meaning when I show up, I got to show up looking confident in what I'm talking about, but I'm a founding member of the Dread Going But Glad I Went Club of introverts. And so, but one of the things I liked about playing Steve Jobs is I could free my inner a-hole. And so I would do a Q&A, but getting back to what you were talking about, Jeff, I remember in one of the presentations, one of the things I talked about as Steve Jobs is I said, I can't stand overused terms whose half-life went away many years ago. Like words like mission, vision, culture. I said, 2 levels down from a CEO, people don't even know what those things mean. They just hope they're going to have a job in 6 months. Yeah. And so someone in the audience, a Brit, said to me, with his British accent, he said, well, Steve, I think you're right about that. And what about this word culture? Culture, if they throw around this word culture, you have a better word for that. And I paused and I said, I don't have a word, but here's a good culture. If everybody in the company wakes up and says, I can't wait to go to work, you have a good culture. Yeah. If you have people who wake up and say, I hate my job and I'm trapped, you have a bad culture. And in fact, I'm going to be introducing this to the world on Marshall Goldsmith's LinkedIn Live show, because if you want to improve your culture, what you say to your people, and I'm just giving it away because that's kind of where I am in life, to just give stuff away. Ask the people in your company, and they can do it anonymously. You could say, what positive, consistent behaviors do we have to do? And what negative behaviors and they have to be observable, do we need to eliminate so that when you wake up in the morning, you say, I can't wait to go to work. And then what you do is you collect those, and then you make a commitment to your people. And you say, these were the most common observable behaviors that you suggested, most common positive ones, and these are the most common negative ones. And this is what we're doing going forward. And going forward, we'd like to check in with you every couple months to see how we're doing. But doesn't that make sense that if everybody, when they wake up, says, I can't wait to go to work, you got a good culture?
No, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely.
And the thing about it is, as an entrepreneurial leader, whether you're intentional about it or whether you're laissez-faire about it, there's going to be a defined culture there, whether you know what it is or not. It can be good or bad. And it's something you got to work on. But it also can't be sort of artificial, superficial, marketing material, signage type of stuff that is checking the box. So much theater is associated with that because, well, we think we need to have it, and therefore we're going to create some theater around it so it looks like we did the right thing. Same could be said for innovation. A lot of large companies, we got to be innovative, we got to reinvent ourselves, and somebody's got the task of being the innovation manager, and they check the box and they go through the motions, and they got credit for it, but they didn't achieve anything. really. I mean, we deal with that a lot. It's the same. I think you're talking about this whole ideal of it being something that becomes not innate, but ingrained, and versus it's window dressing, or it's just something that's a plaque on the wall.
Well, I think the key to it, and I know there's a lot of controversy around design thinking, but I'm a fan of design thinking, but I apply it not just to technical design. I have a design thinking leadership program, a design thinking suicide prevention program. And so, for instance, one of my articles for the Newsweek Expert Forum was how to implement design thinking leadership. And what I like about design thinking is, if you know anything about it, the first step is you got to let go of everything you know and empathize with whoever you're trying to influence or impact or sell products, services to. So the design thinking leadership program, and when I do coaching, I am a MG 100 coach, but I only coach leaders who want to grow into this leader. So I'm very selective. I don't care what your agenda is. This is my higher purpose, because this is what the world needs. So I thought, gee, just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, leadership is in the followership of the led. So I thought, if I did an avatar of people, if you're a leader, what they want to do, especially in this day and age, especially when you look to our politicians, they want to be able to feel trust, confidence, safety, respect. They want to be able to admire you, feel inspired by you, and like you. Because if you think of the opposites, it's horrendous. What if they don't trust you? They have no confidence in you. They don't feel safe. They don't feel respect. It's awful. And here are the behaviors. So when I coach people, I say, in all your presentations, wherever you are, these are the behaviors that you want to grow into that will result in those experiences. You need to be unflappable, but present. So you can't be robotic, but you got to be calm in the midst of anything, but present. People can feel a connection to you. I think before he ran into trouble, Governor Cuomo, when he did the debriefing sessions, did a pretty good job of that. You felt he was unflappable but present. You also need to be able to take charge, but not be controlling. There's a difference between taking charge of a situation and being a controlling SOB. You also need to be knowledgeable. Were you shooting from the hip? Were you BSing anyone? You need to also have wisdom, meaning were you focusing on what's important and being able to just sort of push away the stuff that was less important? It's also important for you to be have a sense of humor. I'll tell you, at this stage of my life, I can't be around people who take themselves too seriously. They make me want to shoot myself, I'm telling you.
Yeah,
So
I came up in a family where sarcasm was the main religion in the household, and if you couldn't stand it, you had difficulty.
There you go. So there has to be, and then they have to be someone that that you like, but they also have to be someone who's gracious and humble. And I'm still a work in progress. The place where I have the most trouble is humble, because I name drop a lot. But people will say to me, Mark, compared to the people we know, at least you've met those people.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. It's great. Great insights. Guys, don't let me dominate all the dialogue here. Jump in, Caleb.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in looking at your resume and the things you've done and the organizations you've worked with, I'm curious to hear you speak to how you were drawn towards working with entrepreneurs in the first place, given your work with the FBI and all these other individuals that you've worked with. What motivated you to serve entrepreneurs?
Well, I belong to an entrepreneur organization, and when they we have meetings every Saturday, and there's about 900 members all around the world, and I can tell you about it because you would love to join in. I'll even put a plug for it. It's called Metal International, and they have meetings every Saturday from 9 to 1 p.m., 9 a.m. Pacific time, but the CEO, a former British rock musician, Will Henschel. He said, what we all have in common here is we're all unemployable. He said, if I'm in your company, hire me to build a company inside your company, but don't hire me to work for you. I'll do a terrible job. And, and there's this kind of humor that they can't work for other people, because they're driven to do that. And so I have a little bit of that mentality, that entrepreneurial spirit. And also, even though they all have a fear, we all have fear in our lives because every entrepreneur has had many failures, but you just pick yourself up and you go, but they don't live in fear. I mean, I will tell you, the empathy I have for people in large companies, they may get a paycheck, but they're running in fear all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really feel for them. I mean, it's amazing anything gets done in big companies because you can introduce a great idea to them that will change things, but people just stay in their lane. Oh, they don't want to make a mistake. Yep. They're so afraid of making a mistake. So these entrepreneurs, they're like all of you and all of your listeners. They're terrific.
Yeah, it's funny. The first job that I had coming out of the military back in the early 90s was with Westinghouse at the time, one of the great industrial multi-division. It was right there with General Electric, and there's all that history about alternating current and DC and all that. I mean, just a great place. But after I was there for a while, you'd see people, and it's almost like a Dilbert cartoon, walking around the halls feeling totally distraught because they had no power to affect anything and all kinds of accountability for things that were out of their control. It was just this complete victimization syndrome. We used to call it the Westinghouse victim syndrome. And most of the company's broken up, so they can't come after me after 30 years. But it was one of those things. You're so right. I mean, large enterprises tend to pound that innate interest and willingness to take a risk right out of good people, which is why when you started talking about being unemployable, I laughed because I've joked with the team. I said, one of two things happened to me when I was in large companies. I would either figure out how to get fired or have to leave. It was only one of two options. In fact, for a while, I was managing, my title was MDUF, Managing Director until fired at a place that I worked because I knew it was going to happen. And it's exactly what you say. You tend to take action if you're entrepreneurial, and you don't worry a lot about the consequences if you firmly believe it's the right thing to do. And that's not what happens in most large enterprises. I mean, it's a great insight.
No. Here's another insight. I have a podcast called My Wake Up Call, and I use it basically to introduce my guests to each other. So they're very personal conversations. And Jeff, you don't know it, but you're going to be a future guest. But you'll be joining people like Larry King, Norman Lear, Tom Steyer, Esther Wojcicki, Jordan.
You can't get anybody good, huh?
Jordan. Wow. I had Jordan Peterson was great. I had him on, and he's such a busy guy, the psychologist from Canada. After 40 minutes, I know everyone was hitting on him. And so, people, I guess because I'm a shrink, people open up. And so it's 40 minutes. And I say, Jordan, thank you for, I know you're really busy. And he, and I guess what happens is as people open up, he says, I've got more time. Ask me another question. So we went another 30 minutes, but I think you're so right about needing to not give in to the fear. And one of the people I know, I haven't had him on, but I'm going to. He was the Jack Corcoran. He was the CEO of the Kaiser Permanente Foundation. And one of the points he made in one of our conversations is he said, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to forgive yourself for mistakes. If you're the kind of person who keeps beating on yourself in an unrelenting way for mistakes, you're not going to take chances.
Right.
You just got to let it go. I mean, if you're going to hate yourself, then you can't be an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean you like mistakes, but you just have to be a little better with yourself because you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, Mark, if you've got any pointers for our listeners on how to avoid that kind of fear of failure or fear of making a mistake or avoiding a hazardous mentality as they walk through the entrepreneurship journey, I'm sure that would be great.
So here's a story, and it's one of the most inspiring and best lessons to me. A good friend of mine named Jim Mazzo was the CEO of Advanced Medical Optics. They make Blink ophthalmic solution, and then it was sold to Abbott, and he continued. And then I think it was recently CEO of Zeiss Optical. But about 15 years ago, one of their top products was found to be hurting the cornea. So without checking with his board, without checking with anyone, he pulled the product immediately. So I called Jim to tell him I was so proud of him. It was like the fellow who pulled Tylenol many years before. And so catch this. He said, Mark, I'm giddy with excitement. I said, what? He said, I'm giddy with excitement. I said, you better close the door, Jim. And I said, what's going on? He said, Mark, we have a great company. Mistakes are inevitable. And he said, all through my career, any mistake or any failure, all of them made me stronger and smarter. And I'm giddy with excitement because I know this one's going to do the same. And I just don't know what it'll look like. And I thought, wow, what a great orientation. And I will give you a tip from my psychiatry background, because I did work in sort of life and death, and I've trained hostage negotiators and done a bunch of things. But one of the best tips that I apply to myself when something goes wrong is early on in my career, when I would be in the emergency room and someone came in and you were afraid that they were going to do something self-destructive or destructive to others, you'd put them on a 72-hour hold. It was called a 5150, which means you could put them someplace where they couldn't hurt themselves or someone else. And in this day and age now, when they do it, they medicate them. But way back when, if you give someone 3 days, they'll calm down. So anytime I screw up or I'm upset by something, in my mind, I put myself on a 72-hour hold and I say, don't do anything to make it worse. Because the majority of people, when they make a mistake, they feel so badly, they do something that makes it worse, and then they feel guilty or embarrassed, and they miss the breakthrough. I'll ask the three of you. I'm assuming that all of you have had breakthroughs in your life, correct?
Without a doubt.
And how often were those breakthroughs preceded by a breakdown that wasn't particularly pleasant?
Absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah. So what happens is what a breakdown is. Think of it this way. When you're in flow, your true north is lining up how you think, how you feel, and how you act. You're in the zone. But then when your true north is ripped away, it's like the compass starts spinning in circles, and you start to sort of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions start to get almost decoupled from each other. And what happens is, in that anxiety, we often do things that make it worse, and we do things that we can embarrass ourselves, and we have to apologize to other people. But what's happening is, if you're an entrepreneur, your mind will reconfigure. So the analogy I use is, let's say you have your mind's like a Rubik's Cube, and you have sort of a certain orientation to it, and then it gets all mixed up. And then someone said, oh, by the way, you know what it looked like before you got all mixed up? That's not the end goal anymore. You say, oh my God, I don't even know what to go towards. But if they give you something else, whatever that would be, what'll happen is your mind, your thoughts, feelings, and actions, if you let them reconfigure, they will align with the new future.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great mentality, and absolutely great pointers for our listeners. I know we all struggle with it. The three of us on the podcast and everyone else listening too.
Yeah, something that's inspired me. How many of you know what Manu Ginobili's Eurostep is? Okay, so if you know anything
over my head.
If you know anything about basketball, now look up Manu Ginobili from the Spurs. So he's credited with the Eurostep. What it is when you're going in for a layup and there's a defender standing in your way, you step in front and then you go to the left or you go to the right of him. And what happens is you don't lose all your momentum.
Kind of like a stutter step.
Yeah. So instead of hitting a brick wall and saying, "Oh, what am I going to do?" And so if you can just watch the videos of him doing it and try and internalize that, and so you can always stay in motion. You may not be able to go direct, but you can still keep most of your momentum.
That's how he avoids a charge, right? I mean, that's how he avoids it. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, and it's so true because many times you're headed down a certain path, and we see this a lot in entrepreneurship. You've got conviction around the concept, around the product you're building. And then you find out, because the market tends to be ruthlessly efficient, that you were way off base. And you can either let that kill you or figure out, well, what did I just learn from that? And how do I change directions slightly without losing momentum? The insights that come from some of those kind of not near death, but maybe near business death type of experiences can inform something much bigger. I mean, it opens that pathway to the possibilities that you had ruled out because you were so fixated on where you were originally going. I mean, it's the way you put that makes it really easy to understand. I mean, I'm definitely going to watch some Spurs videotape too to see that move.
Right, exactly.
Can I give you another tip about hiring people and who you should marry and who you shouldn't?
That'd be great.
So before you bring people, one of the things I'm sure you've all seen is that hiring the wrong person, especially someone who's even a little bit toxic, can bring an entire company down, because most people, especially people who have, hypertrophied left brains, are conflict avoidant when it comes to personalities. They really are. And I do presentations on how to master conflict so that you're never afraid of them. Because if you're afraid of confronting conflicts, you're just not going to make it in this world anywhere. But one of the things you can do to prevent it is it's what I call the 3 Ds. And so when you're hiring someone, you're dating someone and you're thinking about marrying them, work into the conversation something like, geez, in your prior jobs or in your career or in your prior relationships, talk to me about differences of opinions, disagreements, and disappointments. Because you're always going to run into them. If they have zero insight that they contribute to any of those, that's strike 1. Strike 2 is, well, I can understand how that's frustrating to you and whatever. Usually difference of opinions, disagreements, and disappointments, usually, there's 2 sides to every story. How did you contribute to any of them? If, again, they're clueless, that's strike 2. But there's a strike 3. You can say, going forward, in the event that we run into a difference of opinion, disagreement, or disappointment, what's the best way from your point of view that we handle it so that we can get back on the rails? If they're still clueless, don't hire them, don't marry them.
That's great. That's great.
I hope everybody's taking notes out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's so good.
No, we are right here.
I've been with the same woman for coming up on 40 years, 37 years married. And some people would describe our relationship as being an old world relationship. My wife comes from a different cultural background than I do. And there's lots of hand waving and speaking loud. But what that means is that there's never anything hidden. Whatever is going on is on the table, and you figure out a way to work through it. And it's, it's interesting. You can't be afraid of a disagreement if you're going to have a long marriage, because it will happen. No doubt about it.
So I want to give you a magical tip for the other people who are listening who don't have as successful a marriage. So I attended something called Renaissance Weekend. They have these things around the country, and I met some person. I won't mention who he is, but I saw that he was there with his family, and he's a prominent person. I said, "Hey, how's it going bringing the family around here?" And you know what it's like when you bring your family to one of these events. If you're one of the main people, your spouse is saying to you, "I'll be on my good behavior during the event, but when you get home, and so I could see that was going on. And I said to him, and he said, well, you know how it is, the kids act up and your spouse is, trying to be pleasant, but their smile doesn't touch their eyes.
Right.
And I said, here's a tip for you. It's in one of my books called Talking to Crazy. And it's called FUD crud. Terrible name, but people remember it because it's FUD crud. And I said, this is what FUD crud is. When you're in an argument with someone or they're venting, instead of telling them to calm down and, which just makes them more angry, you lean in because I'm going to give you a tactical script. So if they're venting or they're acting up, you pause for about 2 seconds because you want to let them know that you've heard what they said. And then you say to them, here's the FUD part of it. You seem frustrated and I think you're holding back. They're going to go, what? This is the Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope in Zaire. And they're going to go, what? You could say, and you say, you seem frustrated, and I think everybody's taking notes here. You seem frustrated, and I think you're holding back because I think you're upset and disappointed too. That's the FUD. And they're going to go, what? See, people will talk about being frustrated because everybody's frustrated. If you say, you sound angry, they're going to say, no, I'm not, or you seem upset. So you want to lead with, you seem frustrated, but I think you're holding back. I think you're upset and disappointed. Why don't you tell me about all of those and see if we can make it better? And what you want to do is get them, it's like the layers of an onion. You get them to express their frustration. And then after that, and you have them say a little bit more. Yeah. And then they're upset. And then by the time they're talking about their disappointment, either in you or here we are again in the same situation, they're much calmer. And you can often have a better conversation.
That is awesome. I could have used that repeatedly. And I will tell you that being the imperfect human that I am, I don't know how many times I've heard an important person in my life say, don't tell me how to feel.
Likewise.
Try to get them to calm down and have a rational conversation. So that is life advice. That is fantastic.
I don't know if our listeners realize what gold they're getting here today. We should be charging for this.
Yes, absolutely.
Amazing.
So do I have time for another tip since you guys, I haven't won out my welcome yet?
Oh, please. Absolutely.
Okay. So, I have a passion about saving lives, especially of youth. And a friend of mine reached out to me. His 14-year-old son died by suicide 3 years ago. And actually, if you look up Teen Mental Health Webinar on YouTube, you'll see his Goalcast video to 12 male entrepreneurs, and he's an entrepreneur, about how he blew it with his son. And it's his 9-minute Goalcast video, which got 9 million views at Goalcast. And then it's about 20 minutes of me giving advice to parents. And so we're pivoting now because it's such a dark topic, but something we're seeing is something that we call failure to launch, where you have a child and they're just not making it. And they keep bouncing back. And COVID has not done any of us any favors. So one of the things that you might follow, and we're having families do this, is what we all have to realize is that our kids don't listen to what we tell them. They imitate us when they grow up. And so what we're having families do, and the mother and father lead this, is every day they go through these 4 steps. And the first one is each person talks about something they felt upset about. And again, don't scare your kids. Don't say, well, I got fired and we have to sell the house and we're going to be in the streets tomorrow. So pick something that's not going to scare the heck out of your kids. So the first thing is each person talks about something they felt upset about. The next thing is their impulse. What did it make you want to do? And the third step is, what did you do? And the fourth step is, how did that turn out? And the reason this is so positive is because children see their parents being reactive. They don't see their parents pausing. And so what you're modeling for your children is self-restraint, especially after what the impulse was. And what we're noticing is it's really helping marriages, because after they have this conversation in the family every day, what's happening is that husbands and wives are going upstairs and saying, what I was really feeling upset about was you, but I didn't want to bring it up in front of the kids. And what I'm doing instead of that is I'm telling you, and please don't do that thing that you do or you did today. And then how did that work out? But I think if families practice this, it's going to teach kids self-restraint, which most of us don't have.
Absolutely.
That's also fantastic advice. And I'd say, and some of the way you describe that is very much how my parents would have dealt with an issue when I was small. And some of that's been lost, I think. I mean, they didn't argue in front of us ever. They had conversations, but it was between them and not in front of us for exactly the reasons you described. It's great. I mean, it's sometimes things that are time honored and old need to be renewed. And that's really great insight.
Oh, thank you. So any other questions? Any of you having any life problems, anything going down the toilet that I can pull you out of?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I can disclose in public. But one of the questions we do like to ask all of our guests, this is kind of one of our boilerplate questions that always turns up some interesting responses, is if you had the opportunity to go back in time to visit with your younger self, given all the experiences you've gained over the years and all the knowledge you've gained, what sort of advice might you give your younger self, given the opportunity to go back in time?
When someone says no to you, it doesn't mean you're wrong or you shouldn't do it. It just means they won't help you.
That's beautiful.
Interesting. I like it.
That's beautiful. So where can we find out more? This has just been a wealth of where can our audience find out more about all the great stuff that you're doing, the insights you have? What's the best way for them to plug into you?
Well, I have a QR code if you have a video. So if people take their camera and just clue in on that, that'll take you to my LinkedIn profile. And I got a lot of stuff going on LinkedIn. I have a podcast called My Wake Up Call that Jeff's going to be a guest on. He's already getting nervous.
I'm ready.
Yeah, and we also have a show called No Strings Attached, because on LinkedIn, and it's an oasis where I bring on people and I say, no upselling. You're going to give away stuff for free. And if people want to steal it, build a course on it, do anything with it, they don't owe you anything because there's no strings attached. So we've had Marshall Goldsmith on. We had Ivan Meisner. He's the founder of BNI, just great guests. And so you can find that. And I have a website, markgoulston.com, and I hope people will visit that. And then I got a bunch of YouTube videos. You can see me in Russia. You can see some clips of me playing Steve Jobs. And, and then you go to Amazon. I've written or co-written 9 books, and you can find some of the stuff there.
Well, we'll include links to that too. If you're listening and you just want to find those things easier, you can find those in the show notes of this episode. If you're driving, don't go looking for it now.
One last thing, because this is relatively recent. My first book was called Get Out of Your Own Way. It was published in 1996. And can't figure this out, but 2 weeks ago, it made the top 10 in the Wall Street Journal for nonfiction ebooks. But I have an audio course based on the book at Himalaya Learning. And if you go to himalaya.com/defeat, the course is called Defeating Self-Defeat. And if you use defeat in the promo code, you can listen to the course, for free. And unless I've, already worn out my welcome here.
No, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This has been a treat, a real pleasure, a great way to spend a Friday afternoon. And And I know we're all going to be reviewing our notes afterwards because there's definitely some fantastic insights and tips. Really appreciate having you on.
Well, thank you. And to viewers and listeners, please note that when I talked about the FUD crud, Davis and Caleb took out notes to take.
Yeah,
we'll be reviewing them.
Absolutely. I'm
not
even going to deny it.
All right, Mark. Take care. So nice having you on.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.